Welcome all to our anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing compliance officer masterclass or forum, whatever you might want to call it. I just want to thank all those people for attending and appreciate those who let me know in advance that they were unable to. I get that there's a whole series of other issues that become a problem for us just today that we've just got to deal with and move on, hence the reason for doing the recording. This is, we had a number of people online, and there was some robust discussion around a series of things to do with money laundering, and to do with the cashless gaming and some other issues that come to light. And I didn't think it was appropriate that was published and publicised without only those that were there. So there was some good, robust discussion. So to ensure that we sort of meet the requirements or help those that weren't there get some information, what I'm doing now is I'm going to run through the presentation that we sort of went through and we sort of talked around. The thing to remember is that you have responsibilities in regards to your AMLCTF requirements, your anti-money laundering and terrorism requirements that we want to make sure that you're aware of. As I said to people on the day, and most of you who know me, Michael Huggett from CHD Partners, some of you we've been working with for many years, and many of you are using the CERT system to manage your AMLCTF compliance. The goal here is to make sure that you are compliant. The main reason is to make sure that you're covering off on those things that you need to. It's not about going over the top, and it's not about pushing limits. It's just going, we know that clubs are busy. We know that you have a whole series of requirements that you need to comply with. The thing is, I'm finding more and more is that some people just aren't really aware of what that looks like. So the purpose of these sort of classes as we move forward will be to give you some oversight, give you some insight as to what you should do, and give you a reference point to move forward, give you some options to deal with them. And always remember that if you're unsure, drop us a call, book a call, and happy to have a conversation with you offline. So the learning outcomes in terms of the role of the compliance officer today, your program requirements, talk about employee training, talk about transactional monitoring. And this is the issue, is this is one of those big ones that people just aren't getting. There's a big, seems a bit of a myth between that area between the money laundering requirements and your gaming machines requirements, which are two separate things. So often what I'm finding is that people are getting very confused or get a bit of cross information across both those areas. So hopefully we can sort of clarify that today as well. And if you've got your AUSTRAC compliance report, which is due on the 31st of March, any of those of you that need some assistance, give us a call, book in a time, and we'll go through it. So you all really know what money laundering is. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but just remembering that, those of you who think that there is no laundering going on in your club, I would suggest to you that is not correct. We've helped a number of clubs last year, particularly lodge a number of suspect matter reports because of people or customers or individuals walking into the club, literally walking up to a machine, putting money in, cancelling it and going to the CRT machine, the cash redemption terminal, and walking out with the dollars. And some of this has been through observation by staff who are now more aware about what's going on and what they're looking for, as opposed to just the monitoring of transactions. The terrorism financing of this is the other part of it, which obviously has some other requirements. And the reality of this is that for probably most of the clubs or most of you that are looking at this now, it's more the money laundering aspect, which is the key that we're concerned about, probably sort of more in New South Wales and the like. Just be aware that the legislation has been around since 2006. I still think that even through discussions with new clients today, people are aware it's out there, but haven't been aware that it's been around for such a long period of time. We've worked where we've helped organisations build manual programs back in 2010, assisted with some desktop audits. We've then worked through, as you know, with some other clients where we've done the full-blown AUSTRAC review with them and been in those meetings with them. So be aware that you have responsibilities, and AUSTRAC have a responsibility for regulating and monitoring that, so that your business, making sure that you comply. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that if you think that you don't have laundering going on, as I said, I would think twice about it, and remembering that you could have people come to your club that have been identified elsewhere in terms of some of the suspect matter reports that are being submitted, and at some point you could be targeted for that reason. what you need to remember, and particularly the CEOs and the secretary managers and the general managers, whatever those roles are, and I know that within clubs there's various names for those people, but if you're sort of running the show, so to speak, remembering that there are considerable penalties that play out if you do not comply with the legislation. Now, I understand that you've got a role, that the board has a role to play. It has a due diligence requirement to make sure that they meet the responsibilities of the legislation. The reality for a lot of you is those board members they are all mostly all volunteers. Some are um, in your bowls groups or in your bowls teams, and in other various parts of the club there might be a member. Others have some other particular background, might be lawyers and the like that can assist. But from what I'm seeing now is that a lot of your boards are guided by you as the CEO. So remember, if you can't provide the guidance and don't do what needs to be done correctly, then the board is at risk, of which that's what they're employing you for. Unlikely to potentially occur for most of the clubs that I'm aware of, but just be aware that obviously Westpac had a number of breaches, and this was an order that they received, which was simply, as you can see, it was dated the 21st of October for payment of $1.3 billion for their penalties as a result, and had 28 days to pay. Now, as I said, I'm not suggesting that this for any moment is going to happen at this sort of significant cost for a club because of the type of scenario we're in, but just be aware that AUSTRAC are out there and will breach you if you're not complying with the requirements. Remember that the whole idea is that from a laundering point of view, what a person, an organised crime point of view, or someone who's out there as a drug dealer wants to place their money into the system using your EGMs potentially, or your and EGMs are what applies to you from a laundering point of view. Remembering that the TAB, whilst you're a provider of that service, the TAB comes under the tab, or your wagering comes under the TAB requirements, not yours. But basically, they're placing the money in the system, they're layering it, and the whole idea is that it gets integrated. So what they can then do is legitimate those dollars, and what it allows them to do is, if they happen to have the police lob on the door, starting to ask questions, they can legitimise the fact that their dollars haven't come from drugs or otherwise. Now, I've had a couple of conversations with people, if you look at the Crime Commission report, stating that it's not all about laundering. Some of it's just about them using their drug money to make more money. At the end of the day, one way or another, it's about taking dollars that has come from illegitimate earnings, putting into a system and trying to earn dollars out of it. So, the reality of it is, in this day and age, we have a responsibility, a legal requirement to identify those money laundering requirements where we can do something in place. Let's make sure we do, A, from a legislation point of view, and B, from a reputational damage point of view. If you don't be seen to be doing the right thing, it's going to cause you significant other grief. Remember, the role of an AMLCTF compliance officer is you're a responsible point of contact. You need to understand the profile of your customers, so that's know your customers. Now, remembering that the KYC requirements for you and the club apply when it's a transaction of $10,000 or more cash or check, which is very different to your gaming machine requirements, where you're identifying someone that's basically, depending on your club, your 2 to 5K payout. So there's a difference. The remember is, this is about know your customer. This is about trying to identify who your customers are and determining where they sit. Transactional monitoring, we need to monitor our transactions. So for some of you, it's a little bit difficult, I know. When you've got eBet, you've got your Aristocrat system, 7,000. They've got different ways to do that, but we'll talk about a process today that's fairly simple. And now with Max Gaming, you have that reporting process. Receives and reports on suspicious matters. So where that is, you need to make sure you use the AUSTRAC online reporting process to do SMRs. And a few of you on the call today know that I've helped you with those. So if you need some assistance, don't hesitate to ask. Obviously, you need to report to AUSTRAC annually by the 31st of March. Any feedback you've had from AUSTRAC, you need to obviously respond back to, and your job is to keep records. Remembering from a records point of view is that all I'll say to you, whether it's a work health and safety or an AMLCTF process, evidence, evidence, evidence. If you have a regulator or you have a complaint or something of that nature, and they come out to you and they ask you for what you've done, simply telling them is not good enough. You need to be able to show evidence around that. This slide outlines the program requirements. I'm not going to talk through these in depth. What I want to most of you understand what you need. You've got a program in place. We just need to make sure now that we start to get the evidence to support those processes and make sure that you can ensure that you're meeting those regulatory compliance. Again, managing risk, the AMLCTF process is about managing risk, and it's about the size and nature of your club. So for some of you would say, we're just a club, we don't have any AMLCTF requirements, but the reality of it is you all have some risk, and depending on whether you're located in the Newcastle area or the CBD of Sydney, as opposed to being out at Cowra or Tamworth or Wellington in central New South Wales, you've got differing risk requirements. So the important thing to think about is what are those risks in your particular location, and then we need to set up a structure that meets those requirements for your particular size and nature of your club. So again, if you've got some particular issues, don't hesitate to reach out and we can have that discussion. In terms of your risks, most of those risks that take part with you in the club are the gaming machines you use to clean money. As I said earlier, the whole idea is to walk into the club, basically put the money in a machine, cancel credit in one way, shape or form, go to the CRT or go to get a payout, have those transactions legitimised. That's the reality of why people are using your EGMs or electronic gaming machines or your poker machines to legitimise that activity. Now, as I said, it doesn't mean that everybody's doing it. It means that you will have some people doing it, and I can tell you now that based on some information or things that we've worked with for people last year, they're in clubs that you don't think that they would occur with, and sometimes not the people that you think about. So that understanding a customer, being aware of what's going on in your own club, being observant, and having a bit of a culture within the club that the staff know that they can talk to the supervisor and you can do something about that is really critical. Look, some of the red flags in regards to a customer who might be thinking about doing the wrong thing or exhibiting those sort of issues would be exhibits a lack of concern regarding the risk of losses. So again, all of a sudden they're playing a large amount of money and they haven't won a lot, or all of a sudden they're happy to put money through and then do a cancel credit knowing they've lost a significant dollars. That's a pretty good red flag that there's something not right. Has difficulty describing the nature of his or her business or industry. Now, at the end of last year, they've brought in the thing around source of funds and source of wealth. So I know historically in clubs we tend to not want to ask questions. It's about privacy of people and individuals. But this is obviously all starting to change when you talk about understanding who the individual is. The same things coming in terms of responsible conduct of gambling. Okay, so just start to think about knowing who people are and starting to ask some questions. It may not mean that you give this task to your junior staff, and I know that clubs are having significant problems at the moment getting and keeping staff and getting staff who have some experience, but it's about pinpointing those supervisors and engaging with your supervisors and ensuring that they're aware about how and what to do and what to look out for, and then how to respond is critically important. Again, you'll have some people who will sit around and want to sell tickets or buy tickets, for example, off people. That's putting an indication that there's something not going wrong, and it maybe engages them out where they're trying to get a payout or the like that's just below that sort of 10,000 threshold transactioning process. But remembering for you guys, it's about the cost to do with both the check and the cash amounts. What are your risks? I mean, if things go wrong, and for some of the clubs, you won't have a problem at all, won't be an issue. Whereas for others of you, it could be adverse publicity. Remembering, and you can see from the slide beforehand, there's some fairly significant fines when it comes to the penalties around your AMLCTF requirements, criminal charges, restrictions to operate freely, and that damages to reputation. I'm going to say that that's probably the biggest issue. Let's face it, the dollars are one thing. The fact that your board of directors could be held liable. But the other big issue becomes that reputational to the damage if all of a sudden, reputation of the club, if all of a sudden you come under notice, the next thing you know, there's been people who have been arrested for money laundering in your club. So just be really aware of that. In terms of the requirements of the legislation, it sort of requires you to have a number of risk assessments. One of those is identifying the risk of your club, particular customer risk, employee risk, and venue risk. So what I'm going to do is talk you through a couple of tools that we've developed to make this job really simple. They get updated annually as part of your program, and it allows you to look at those risks in your club as you work through. My apologies. Mouse is not playing games for me today. Right. So, club profile. What we've done is we've developed a club profile. The purpose of this is, and I won't go through how to get these today, but I'll put another video out for those for certain users where you can get access to see this. And I've talked already a few of you through this process. Basically, the club profile allows you to go through and review your club, looks at the various different number of machines, payouts, staffing, and the like. And by reviewing that club and updating that profile each year, allows us to look at the risk and any changing risk, and then we can determine any changes to your program and the like, which is something that which you'll be asked specifically in your annual compliance report. Customer risk, it means about having a look at those risks to your customers. So some of you have got people like some organisations that we work with obviously have some chemists and doctor surgeries that are built into part of your organisation. Others, you might have a gym. Others of you might have other sort of areas that are built into the club that provide additional risk. So what we've done is developed a process that allows us to do that customer risk assessment, and then we can determine who we're looking at and how we manage that risk based on your customer requirements. Remembering from an AMLCTF point of view is we're talking about specific risks to do with customers and the like. We're not looking at the risk of your venue from a security risk point of view. We're looking at it from an AMLCTF risk point of view. The other thing is there's a requirement to look at your employee risk. So here again, you'll see that the risk that our greenkeepers might have to the club would be significantly different to someone who's a gaming room supervisor or a gaming analyst or someone who's working full-time in and around your machines. So the important thing is once we identify who the employees are, the types, and then we determine the risk associated, then that's when we can determine how we're going to manage those particular risks associated with those particular types of people in your organisation, and also how you would monitor that over time. Venue risk, this is an example of a matrix that we've put together in terms of how you identify your venue risk. It looks at some of those things around gaming machines, your opening hours, your venue controls. There's no real right or wrong to some of these, but what we're trying to do is give you a bit of an example and start to work through what are those venue risks that we need to be aware of, how do we start to control some of these, how are we aware of where they sit, and what level of risk are you from a club point of view, and then what are those things we put into place to help you mitigate that particular risk for your site. Having a paper documented program or a documented program, it doesn't matter what it is if it's just there and you don't keep reviewing it and we don't update it and we don't look to put other strategies in place, you might as well not have it. It's not worth the paper or the system that it's written on. PEPs have been looked over the last few years. So a politically exposed person, when the PEP legislation first came into play, it predominantly looked at overseas PEPs. This has been changed to look at people who are locally as well. So you'll see there it could be, do you have individuals that come to your club that are federal, local government, state government politicians? The other thing could be, do you have sort of financially exposed persons? So do you have people who have large dollars that come to the club? Could be influential. So they're the sort of people we need to look at. So if we're clear about who our politically exposed persons are, looking at the risk around those, making sure we identify them, and just being clear that we're not accepting money and money's not being donated to your club, that you could be holding yourself or putting yourself at risk. Employee training, remembering that your employees, there's a requirement to train your employees. Now, that means to train them into your program. So, whatever your program is, you need to, hey, you have a program, making sure that your AMLCTF training is associated with your program. Just to do some training on AMLCTF is one thing, but the part of your training should be what your program is, how your program works, and then your training needs to be guiding people about what they do around that. The reality of this is, our view would be it gets done annually, and it should mean that when a new employee starts, they do that training as well, not necessarily wait for 12 months or 2 years until you decide to do some face-to-face. It could be simply someone sitting down and taking them through your program or a particular document. So it doesn't have to be online. It doesn't have to be, 4 or 5 hours. It could be just making sure that your staff and those particular employees are aware of their responsibilities in regards to your program and what they need to do. So the thing to remember is who needs to be trained, those people who are associated with your AML/CTF risk. So depending on the club, you might have people in greenkeepers, you might have people that are looking after bowling greens or their contract kitchen people. They may not necessarily need to be doing your training. You might decide that you want to make them aware, but the thing to remember is it's going to be more your board, your senior managers, and those particular people who have a face-to-face requirement in your business that are dealing with gaming and going to be able to make those observations and be able to make a call in regards to your AML/CTF risks in your business. And as I've sort of said, some of those types of training can be varied. You can see there's a few different ways you can do that, which I've already indicated to you. One of the biggest misconceptions is transactional monitoring. So I know I've worked with a lot of the clubs over the years, and I know that you, from a gaming point of view, a lot of the CEOs, or whether it's a gaming analyst or the like, are really clear about looking at transactions and what are they doing and machines that are performing and the like. So you're doing this stuff regularly and generally daily. The thing is, from a money laundering point of view, is what doesn't tend to happen is it doesn't tend to get recorded. Having been through a number of audits, and particularly whether it be an AML/CTF or a money laundering process with AUSTRAC, or whether it be a work health and safety audit, the reality is if you don't have evidence, it's very hard to prove that you do or you don't do it. So transactional monitoring means that you've now got the Max Gaming report that allows it to flag some suspicious reporting. It gives a bit of an indication as to whether the timeframes, the reporting aspect, and the like. It still means that you need to look at that report and then potentially drill down into some of those transactions. So it just means, you look at a transaction, you might have a look at a transaction, it shows there's no play, or there was a cancelled credit, or for example, there was a cancelled credit, but you go and have a look at it and go, well, hang on, they were playing that machine for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour. You can see there's been some significant play, which you can do through your various different eBet and S7000 systems to identify whether there's been some play. What we're looking for, obviously, is that someone's come in, they've made a bit of a play or made limited play or no play at all, cancel credit, and they've walked out, and basically what they're trying to do is legitimise. So what we want to make sure we do is that where we can, we ensure that we look for those unusually large transactions, we look for complex transactions, right, and we look for patterns that don't seem to be legitimate. Or again, as I said, someone comes in, they've played, they've got out quickly, walked out with some dollars. And this is going to mean that at some point you are going to have to potentially look at your machine, go back, use your CCTV to review whether the person was played, whether, how long have they been there for? Are they known, not known, depending on that scenario. It doesn't mean that you're going to jump in and look at everyone that jumps at a machine, but what it does mean is that unusual transactions are the things that we're after. But remembering, if you go back to the breach from Westpac earlier, they had a number of transactions occurring where nothing was looked at, nothing was reviewed, which caused them some significant grief. So as I said, I'm not suggesting that little Mary May that comes in on Saturday afternoon every day and you know her and she's playing the machines and she's there for a period of time and all of a sudden she has a win and she walks out into cancel credit. that doesn't mean you necessarily have to go and do a check on all those types of people. It's the people where there's suspicious transactions, limited play, are the ones that we're going to be particularly concerned about. For those of you in CERT, you know that what we've done, and this has recently just been updated. So we've added now, as a result of catch up the other day with a couple of clubs, we've added the max report to this, and it allows you to now record your monitoring, and then allows you, as part of this process, to do a bit of an investigation on it. Pretty simple, and it allows you to document that sort of process. So that's what we've done now in CERT to make sure that we can get you to be able to record that monitoring, show some evidence of that, and what this does, it meets your legislative requirement quite. Remembering that by the 31st of March, you have an AUSTRAC report due. So for many of you, you jump online, go to austrac.gov.au, and on the front page, it will take you to a link on that particular page. Any of you that have any dramas or problems, don't hesitate to give us a call, and happy to help you work through that. This year, like many other years, it'll ask around transactional monitoring. You'll say, have you identified anything? If you say no, it asks you why not. So there's an assumption that obviously that you will find something. You will find some sort of transactions. If you haven't, you haven't. But is that because you haven't been doing any monitoring, or the fact is you've got a system in place and it's quite simply that you haven't? So again, it's about being honest and upfront and being clear. But up until last year, what happened was you'd be asked whether there was not, and when you said no, there was nothing. Now you're asked to sort of document why or why not you don't have had any reports of the like. This gives you a quick overview about how to jump onto it. As I just said earlier, I won't go through step by step. And as I said, basically, if you've got any dramas, give us a call. The thing around suspicious matter activity. After considering all the circumstances surrounding a transaction, you may have a feeling of apprehension or mistrust about a transaction. If you're not sure, people need to make sure, as I said, you talk to the supervisor, you talk to the duty manager, okay? So the reality of this means is that, again, we need to make sure that we flag our staff to understand the red flags. We're not expecting that they be the ones to walk up and talk to someone, but we would be expecting that when they identify some suspicious activity, or, as I said, the fact that someone walked into the club and basically put some money in a machine and walked out, that someone would pick up on that and say, well, that's not correct. What that would then flag it is that either your gaming analyst or your CEO or someone else responsible would then go to your either eBet or S7000, go and check out and see whether there'd been some play or not. And then if not, then it might mean you flagged that to go to CCTV and then check and see who that person was, and you would submit a suspect matter report or suspicious matter report. Again, talks about reporting timeframes. That's once you're aware of those. Just be aware that the reality of it is sometimes it takes you a little bit of time to do that investigation. The important part is once you've done that you make sure that you do the reporting process appropriately. Remember that your board has a due diligence requirement to understand what's going on in the club and implement the program. So unlike the days gone past where you could sit back and go, oh, well, that's up to the CEO. That's their job to make sure that they do it. And if they don't, well, then we'll smack them on the wrist. The reality of it is today is the board has a due diligence requirement. So what we're suggesting is in some way, shape or form that you need to be reporting to the board monthly on what your activity is. What we've done in CERT is develop the compliance officer monthly report. Makes it a little bit easier. Feel free to take some of that data and use it yourself. Or for those of you in CERT, as we've been talking about, it's a report I would be doing monthly, and it's now coming up on your compliance checks to do. Not complex, but at least it shows evidence, and again, for the board, gives them some indication that you're actually doing the things you say you're going to be doing. So that gives you a little bit of an overview. The takeout message is that, remember, your AMLCTF program is a requirement. There's legislation that requires you to have it in place. There's legislation requiring you to do the risk assessments around your venue and around your customers and around your employees. The other thing to remember is you need to make sure that you do transactional monitoring. It's something that's been missed, particularly over the last few years, and lots of people will say that they check stuff, but there's no recording of that. And as I said, it's always really hard. Is that when you say I've got it, well, that's okay, that's great, but where is it? So my advice to you, it's like, as I said, if you're going to do something, you need to record it. You need to make sure the information's there, and you need to make sure the evidence is available. Because remembering, while you're the CEO today, you may not be there tomorrow. You might move on. You get a job at the Bahamas or something of that nature. The person behind you has got to then manage what they have. So think about having a system in place that's going to work for people. If you're not sure, give us a call. Happy to have a conversation with you and give you some guidance. It's not about how big or small your program is. It's about something that's going to work for you. If this is of value, please let us know. If you want some information, further information, please contact us. And what we're going to start doing is, as I said, every 6 to probably 10 weeks, we'll do another seminar, webinar on some other items. So feel free, if you've got a particular issue, reach out. Take care. See you guys.